Professor of Art History at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, and he does immersive experiences and integrates virtual reality and technology in his teaching to transport students to the site-space study. And he's also the project director of ZeuxisVR, which is immersive art history, and he does 3D scans of real places, and he's going to tell us about how he does these wonderful things. And so I'm going to sit down and shut up. So this is Eric Hupe. Thank you very much for talking to us tonight.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you all for being here, and thanks, Ray, for the recommendation. It's really, it's. Hold on. Oh, sorry. There. Okay. Can you all hear me? All right.
Yes.
Okay. Good. I accidentally pushed the power button on my headset, which is never a good idea. So I want to do a couple of things this evening, and I want to actually begin with a little bit of a presentation about the type of work that I've been doing, kind of the history and generation of the project, some of the techniques that we use while creating the models that we ultimately host for learning and scholarship. And then later, we're going to actually go and travel through the portals to a couple of the sites that I've set up for us to visit. And we can actually have another kind of mini lesson that we can do in one of the sites to kind of emulate the type of learning that the students are doing when visiting these virtual environments. It's very interesting that, we're kind of sitting in a lecture hall right now, which is actually a very comforting place for me as an art historian, because I teach, several days a week in a lecture hall, not too dissimilar to the one that we're virtually occupying right now. And what I'm showing you on the screen is a rather traditional art history classroom, right? You can imagine, and if you've taken art history before, it's a darkened space. You have projected images on the screen. Your professor is there in the front, kind of explicating those different images. And you are stuck, unfortunately, with those 2D images that are projected on the screen there. As an art historian, the problem for me is that I've had really great experiences bringing students abroad and to teach them what we call in situ or on location, where we're looking at art that is meant to be seen in its original environment. So this is art that's not been taken out of its original context and placed into a museum, for instance, but this is art particularly like fresco painting on walls that are, you have to travel to the place in order to see it. And I always want to try to recreate that experience for my students in the United States, right? Particularly in Easton, Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, I don't have unlimited resources, so we can't all hop on a plane and go to Assisi in Italy and talk about Giotto's amazing frescoes there. So I began thinking about what the next kind of closest equivalent would be, and ultimately settled on immersive technology, and particularly began exploring the space of digital humanities. And I'm showing you on the screen just a couple of studies that have been done about immersive technology, virtual reality, and art history, its application in art history. So there's already a growing body of scholarship around this, and people are beginning to understand the great utility of this technology for conveying some of these spaces. And I became really interested in the application of social technology, social VR applications. So years ago, I began using Mozilla Hubs, and that was kind of my first entry point into social VR, and would host the various sites that we were capturing and creating on that platform. Obviously, as many of you know, Mozilla Hubs was sunset a few years ago, and since then I've been kind of trying to find alternatives. Spatial was one of those alternatives that I used for a very short period of time, and we can talk a little bit about the current platform that I'm using now, which is called MUD, from the MUD Foundation. But all of this led to the generation of this project called ZeuxisVR. The title Zeuxis is probably one that's difficult for people to say, but it actually comes from the very origin story of art history. Zeuxis was this ancient Greek painter who famously made a painting that was so realistic that when it was revealed, birds began flying down and trying to eat the basket of fruit that was painted in the scene. So for me, Zeuxis is kind of the closest equivalent for virtual reality, right? The goal for virtual reality is to create some sort of impression that is similar to what we experience in reality. And here we see some of my students from a few years back capturing some of the spaces that we've created 3D models of. And we will actually visit one of those, actually two of these spaces this evening. The process that we use is one that you might be already familiar with. It's the technique of photogrammetry, a technique that's been well developed for over, more than a decade now. And it just keeps getting better and better. The technology keeps getting better. The software keeps getting better. And also the cameras that you use to capture these spaces continue to get better. But what's really great about photogrammetry, if you're not familiar with it, is it's super easy, relatively, to carry out, right? And what I mean by that is it's non-invasive, so we don't require a ton of equipment when we go into these spaces to photograph them. We don't even require, in our case, we don't use additional extra lighting, which as museums and cultural institutions, they love when you don't use additional lighting. And the technique is fairly simple. You take as many pictures as you possibly can. Yes, there is a technique that we, and a kind of a process that we follow when photographing, but all of those photographs are then stitched together. And here you're actually seeing on this point cloud, each icon represents a single photo that was taken of these spaces. Right? The software then ties all these photographs together to create a point cloud, sometimes a denser point cloud, and you're beginning to see the model emerging from this dense web of points. And those are then connected to create a wireframe, kind of a mesh to the surface of the model. And the real, that can be kind of filled in to create a solid model. But the real magic, I think, is when those same images that you've taken are applied, like wrapping paper around the 3D model, to create then a textured model. And the result is a photorealistic duplicate digital duplicate of the space. This is Michelangelo's Magi Chapel, or the new sacristy that he creates in Florence for the Medici family. We'll be looking at another space of the Medici family commissioned slightly earlier than Michelangelo's work. But this was actually the very first space that we completed with Zeuxis. We were given permission. It was right after COVID. It was kind of right in the first lull of COVID, and Italy was just starting to reopen up. And as a result, we convinced the Bargello Museum, who oversees this space, to allow us in. It was already when tourism was relatively low that summer, so they were happy to kind of welcome us in for a couple of days without tourists to photograph. So this is kind of one of the serendipitous moments, I guess you could say, of COVID, was the ability to kind of start a project like this. More recently, we've begun using LiDAR scanning. So I also have a LiDAR scanner, BLK 360 second generation, and that helps us create even more accurate geometry for our spaces. In particular, we're interested in creating models that could be measured by scholars if they are interested in doing some sort of architectural analysis of the space. And this just creates an even denser cloud and a more precise model. This is a church, a Byzantine church in Ravenna, Italy, that we did a few years ago. And then all of this is hosted on this new platform, MUD, which is very similar to how Mozilla Hubs used to work. I like the functionality of it. I like some of the features that they provide. It's also open access, which I really appreciate as well. And here you can see the kind of dashboard, kind of back end that I'm using. So it's a really pared down editor, not too dissimilar from something like Unity or Unreal, obviously not as capable as those. But I like that, especially as an educator, especially as an art historian. I don't want all the functionality of Unreal or of Unity, because I just get overwhelmed in that case. And the great thing is that then it allows us to create these virtual classrooms. And in some cases, I was explaining to Terry before people were joining the talk this evening, that I occasionally embed, for instance, videos about the space that students watch while they're exploring. and it gives them an activity also to do while other students are kind of loading in, because it takes time, as you can imagine, to get 20 students into their VR headsets into the same space. So this kind of enhances that experience a little bit more. And here's a class that was being run in one of these platforms. I think this was probably a Mozilla screenshot, but I love that you have the functionality of a laser pointer, which I'm of course very familiar with as an art historian, using a laser pointer in my normal classroom. And then we can also draw on things, so we could draw on the walls and draw on Michelangelo's sculptures, which my students always think is really funny. And it's a great kind of additional enhancement that would not be possible, obviously, in the real world. And here we have students that are, completing various activities. They're drawing on the walls, trying to find different iconographic features, as I often ask them to do certain activities while they're visiting the spaces. They can fly up to the ceiling, which again speaks to the utility of this technology, right? That you have increased access, increased accessibility to some of the spaces. You can't go flying up into the ceilings of the Magi Chapel on a normal day. Here we see students that are in another space that we did. This is the Scrovegni Chapel, considered one of the great hallmarks of early Renaissance painting, work done by Giotto in the early 1300s. And what I like about this is, it maybe is providing a model for a different type of classroom, right? Not the lecture space that we are currently in, but a space that looks something like this. This is actually a picture from one of my classes where all the students have their headsets. They're all visiting that new sacristy by Michelangelo, and they're having a good time, kind of feeling as though they are really there and that they are really present. More recently, I've begun exploring the possibility to enhance these experiences by adding furniture, by maybe doing some alterations to the spaces to help contextualize them. In this case, we're looking at a room that was used for dining. This is called a refectory. And so the monks would have been located around the perimeter of the room, not unlike what we're seeing in the painting here. So they would have almost been continuous with the painting, right? They would be having a Last Supper of sorts as they take their meals every evening, and are kind of in dialogue then with the painting that we see adorning the walls here. And this is one of my favorites that we have recently done. This is a monk cell in Florence. This is all from the same space, this convent of San Marco in Florence. And this idea actually came from students. Students were asking, like, when we were photographing it, what was it like to actually live in one of these rooms? And when you visit San Marco today, there is no furniture. So you just see the painting on the wall. And it got me thinking of, okay, well, what would the lighting be like? What would the furniture be like? And it automatically gives us then this kind of experience of what it would, a sense of the feeling of what it would be like to be a monk living in this space, and also then seeing the same image every day, right? And praying before this image day and night for years on end. So it kind of begins to approximate that kind of experience. You don't need to read these, but students so far have been absolutely loving this new enhancement of their classroom curriculum. Sometimes I offer a survey at the end of each semester, and I ask for some feedback. And students tend to be really honest about, what's working well and what needs improvement. For instance, students were overwhelmed in the very beginning with the technology. So now I offer a week-long kind of introduction to VR where students take out the headsets, they practice with some games and other activities just to get them used to the functionality of the headset so they're not so overwhelmed when we start to have class, right? And I think what's most important about this project is that it is student kind of driven, right? Or maybe I'm the driver, but they're the engine behind it. So it is created by students for students. And here we see some students that are in the various spaces that we've had the great pleasure of photographing and able to create these experiences for other people. And you can always follow our work along. We are on Instagram. We have our website, ZeuxisVR.com. There you can find all of our models, links to our rooms as well. So if you want to visit some of these spaces, you can do that through our website. And all of our models, and most of them are also downloadable, are on Sketchfab. So they will remain there as long as I possibly can keep them there. So follow along. Any questions after that kind of initial introduction to the project before we move on? Oh, thank you.
Wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So I want to do something I want to do like kind of a test case with all of you, if that's okay. And I want to begin here because we're in a very conventional classroom, right? We're in a lecture hall. We have a 2D, although we're in a 3D world, or at least I'm in my headset, so I'm in a 3D world, but we still have a 2D projection on the screen. And I want to introduce to you this space, like we're in an art history class, right? I'm showing you two images of Benozzo Gozzoli's Magi Chapel. This is a private chapel created in the 15th century for the very wealthy Medici family of Florence. The Medici were a banking family in Florence, and they amassed an exorbitant wealth because of their banking operations and other business operations that they have, particularly in the textile industry. But as a result, they become one of the preeminent families in Florence. And they begin to expend their money, their capital, in new ways. This is partly because at this time in the 15th century in Florence, there is this new idea that by giving back, by making beautiful works of art, making beautiful works of architecture, you are in some ways participating in the creation of magnificent structures, magnificent places, and really creating a view of making the city itself more beautiful. So we're looking at one of the kind of really interesting expressions of this new idea of magnificence, with the expenditure and the paying of Benozzo Gozzoli, the painter, to create and decorate this private chapel. So this is not a church in the traditional sense, right? This is a private space inside the family's home that allows them to not have to go to church. They can instead go to their private chapel space and practice their devotion there, right? And you can see kind of on the screen here that we have an altar piece. I'll walk up to the screen here. We see the altar with an altar piece here by another artist. Oh, sorry. We also then see some details on the screen. The subject of the painting is the procession of the Magi, right? And we see this long procession happening through the painting here. And in fact, many members of the Medici family are shown in that biblical scene. Right, so they're even putting themselves back in history and saying, like, "Oh, we were there. We were one of the kings that were going to greet the Christ child." Now, this is all great, right? But the problem is, well, what's happening on the other walls? And I can't show you that unless I show you more slides. And the problem with that then is that the slides become disembodied from the space itself, right? Now, you can get a lot of information from a rather traditional kind of art history seminar like this, or art history class like this. But it would be even better if we could go and start to make sense of this space by actually looking at the frescoes, looking at the paintings on the walls, and how they relate to each other, how they relate across the space physically, right? So to do that, we're luckily a small enough group. I would suggest that we all go through the portal, and we will go to the Magi Chapel, okay? I'll meet you there. So you are in the Magi Chapel, which is a pretty amazing space. Can I ask? I'm going to ask you questions, if that's okay, and just feel free to unmute yourselves. What's your first impression of this space?
It's really tall. Like,
Yeah, good. Really
and the
tall.
ceiling's really high up.
Good. And as a result, you emphasize the kind of verticality of the building. How does it feel? What am I trying to get at? It's really tall. What is it not then?
It feels a little bit narrow, like we're standing in a hallway.
Yeah, good, right? So it is a really kind of intimate space. It is tall, but it's not really wide, right? You kind of feel like you're all kind of crammed in here. In fact, when you visit the space today, I think they only allow 10 or 15 visitors in at a time. So they're constantly pushing people through the space. It's a little smaller than what it was when it was first built. The little jut out that you're seeing here where the door is and the portal is located in the door, that was not original. So originally that wall was kind of pushed back, so it was a perfect square, the space that we're standing in right now. But that wall was changed to make room for a staircase that's beyond it right now. So a later addition to the palace. But otherwise, it's a really intimate space, and I think that's for a few reasons, right? This has never been done before in Florence. So people are trying to figure out what to do and how to create architecture like this, because this architecture just didn't exist otherwise, right? In fact, the family has to get special permission from the Pope to make this space because, you have to go to church. You don't have private chapels. So this is totally revolutionary architecture, right? And I think they also keep it small because there's only a few family members that would be given access to a space like this. So rather than having a grand church or something like that, you have a rather intimate space for the closest members of the family to participate in, right? What else do you notice about it?
Kind of ridiculously extravagant.
Yes, yeah. I like that. That is totally the right answer, right? I mean, this thing is covered in painting, right? Ceilings are painted. The walls are obviously painted. The floor is beautifully inlaid with different marbles, not just any marbles, some of the most expensive marbles known to man, including that red stone that you're seeing on the ground. That's porphyry. Porphyry was a stone that was only reserved for royalty, and it actually has its roots from the ancient Roman Empire, where only emperors were allowed to use porphyry stone, right? This is the very stone, porphyry, was the stone that Charlemagne was made the Holy Roman Emperor on. He knelt on a disc of porphyry. So, like, the family is saying something about themselves, right? Quite, I think, blatantly, that they see themselves as kings. And this is appropriate in the sense that nobody else is seeing this. This is only for the family to see. So it's kind of like a message for the family, for the members of the family, of how they have to envision themselves, how they think about themselves, right? This would not be seen vastly by the public. Right? So it's almost like you can get away with more inside your home than you can on a public display in a more public setting like a church. And they are pulling out all the stops, right? Just to have all of this level of decoration is immediately thinking, have dollar signs going off. Someone said that it looks a little crass. Right, it is a little crass, and I think that is actually one of the critiques of the Medici family, right? So the older families of Florence, who are just as wealthy, if not, not quite as wealthy as the Medici, but they're old money, and they would say this would be seen as being like totally crass and just not of good decorum. Where the Medici are really seen as nouveau riche, right? So they're building and expressing their money in ways that maybe the old money would seem to be, turn their nose up at a little bit. And just so you know, like how apparent it is, if you come to like a corner like this, and you look down at the wall here, I wish I had a pointer, but you'll see that there are all these little red balls everywhere on gold backgrounds. You will also see that there are these interesting designs. They actually kind of look like rings. There are diamond rings. And in the Renaissance, the diamond was actually inverted. So the point faced up rather than the facet facing down. And this is the heraldic device of Piero de' Medici, the person who's paying for this chapel, right? So we see the Medici balls, we see the Medici rings, we see the Medici, there's feathers also. These are all emblems of the Medici family. And if you look closely, and if we had more time, you see that in the floor as well. They're also all up in the ceiling. So this is like putting your name on everything, right? We have individuals in our own culture that like to put their name on buildings, right? And so this is not something that's kind of been lost on us. So the Medici are doing this as well. Say again.
Oh, I just laughed.
Yeah. So I always think it's never mind. I'm not gonna. Those nouveau riche jokes can maybe be applied even to today about a space like this. So you're already getting a better sense of what this kind of environment was like by visiting this in VR, right, and exploring it in VR. Now, I would suggest. Do you guys anyone have questions about this space? I'm happy to take questions while we're here. We're going to move on otherwise.
I want to say that you're spot on, because when we were looking at the picture on a flat screen, I just thought it was completely different. I thought this was like at the end of a hall,
right?
And so
it is actually at the end of a hall. So out the small doors that are closed there's a small little hallway that leads into then some larger rooms and kind of this larger circuit of rooms that you pass through. So I would have to, I'm not an expert on this room, but I would have to think a little bit about when the chapel is added. I don't think it's part of the original architectural structure of the building when the building is being remodeled by, it isn't. When the building was being remodeled by Piero's father, Cosimo de' Medici. So I think all of your impressions are indicating that this is an afterthought for the building, right? So this is something that Piero, when he takes possession of the family palace, he decides that he's going to put his own stamp on it. So he adds a chapel and finds room, like literally carves out room for it in the palace.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Thank you. So far, this is a great, wonderful presentation. I was wondering, so like you explained, this space is very small, and it was also meant to be for only a few people. How many students do you get in one session? Do you how many students do you have? Like, do you cram them in there, or do you also like kind of try to replicate that as well and go by small groups?
That's a great question. I do small groups, and this is a perfect case study. So in larger spaces, I have the entire class meet, but in this space, I actually have 4 iterations, 4 instances of the same space, and I break the students down into groups of 4, and they visit the space together. And they often have an activity, and then I kind of float between the different rooms together to see, and facilitate conversation there. But I really want them to get that sense. I have in the past also tried to cram them all into one room, and they're all like on top of each other. And, there's this weird thing that sometimes happens where like they appear in each other's bodies. So they're in each other's avatars, which is super uncomfortable for everyone. But that's also part of the point, right? That this space isn't meant for 20 people, right? And I love that activity because it really drives home that point, and they remember that.
Thank you. And also, can I have another question about? So earlier you were talking about like the kind of equipment that you used to create this. So what did you use to create this one specifically?
Yeah. So this room was photogrammetry, created with photogrammetry. We have Sony A7R4 cameras. We have 2 of those that were running in this room. So two people were photographing, myself and a student. We use a tripod. There's no additional lighting, so we use the natural lighting of the space. What you're not seeing is that there are these really ugly lights that are in this room, and we deleted them in the model. We took them out. We repaired the floor where they were standing. They were on the benches where some of you were standing. So we try to get the room kind of back to its original appearance as close as possible. We actually want to push, for instance, that wall that was altered at some point. We want to push it back because if you look, I don't know if you can see this, but if you look at the king that's on the white donkey, so he's there in the corner by the door, but the back of the donkey, the butt of the donkey, is then on the other wall. So it's been separated and disconnected. So I would love to one day kind of put them back in the space. And then and then also we use reality capture, which is now I think has a new name. Just got a new name this week. Capturing reality or real capture. I don't know. It's owned by Unity, and that's our photogrammetry software that we use.
Oh, well, great, thank you. I feel like I'm gonna reach out to you later to if that's okay.
Absolutely.
To maybe have a deeper conversation on how these can be implemented somewhere else. I work at California State Long Beach.
Oh, great! Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I would love to learn more about like the process you follow and how to work with faculty on these things. So,
yeah,
thank
absolutely.
You so
I actually
much.
have a good friend who just retired from there, who's a classicist.
Oh, yeah?
So I'm working with another classicist about creating like archaeological sites for students to explore and that kind of stuff. So absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Reach
Thank
out.
you.
Yeah.
Great. How do you get access to locations like this? And, do you run into huge bureaucratic issues with like permissions to share it?
Yes. That's a short answer. Yes. So the planning starts several months before we go in the summer, and I start by reaching out to each of the lending institutions. In Italy, the structure is a little different. You not only have to write to the cultural institution, so to the museum. In this case, it's the Museums of Florence is who oversees this space. And then they also have to reach out to the Minister of Culture. And the Minister of Culture for that region, Tuscany, Lazio, or whatever, will then sign off on the kind of project. Each region has their own rules, right? So some regions are really strict and other regions are a lot more relaxed and kind of leave it up to the museum to make those decisions. This summer, I just got back about a week and a half ago, and we were in Italy photographing 3 sites. One site allowed me to photograph it and create the model, but the rule was that model cannot be shared. It can only be used for Lafayette students and at Lafayette College. I don't like that kind of agreement. I try my hardest to get everything under a Creative Commons license, fully accessible. And so far, we've been pretty successful. Only 2 of the now 20 some odd sites that we've done have had restrictions on it. They kind of see the utility in creating, more accessible cultural heritage sites, because honestly, this is what's going to then drive interest. I believe, at least, this is what's going to drive interest in these spaces. And it doesn't replace travel, right? If anything, you have people now traveling to these spaces who know something about them and really want to be there. They're not like in these kind of like tour groups that are just kind of like looking passively at the spaces. I have had students now, I've been doing VR kind of teaching for a couple of years now. And my favorite thing is I get letters from students in the summer that finally go and visit some of these spaces. And they're like, wow, it's so similar to what we experience, or it's so different, and how it's different, and how it kind of cued them into looking better when they finally visited them.
Awesome that you're able to do that.
Yeah. And it's great to, it's a great opportunity for my students to be able to kind of join and do this work too. Okay, we have one more room. If we want to kind of go through the portal that's over here at the door, we can look at another space. I kind of have 2 more rooms, but we'll keep it short. But I'll meet you on the other side.
Everybody go through. I know y'all know how to do it. Oh, shoot.
I'll give you a second just to kind of look around and take this all in, because it's a really pretty spectacular space. This is a room that from the very origins of this project, this is a room that I wanted to do. And I finally got access. I think we did this 3 years ago. And it was a total joy to be able to do that. Partly because I think this is like one of the clearest expressions in the Renaissance of an effort to create a virtual world, right? We are in a room where you cannot decipher where the walls really are, where they begin and where they stop. There are no corners to this room. The corners are intentionally blurred, not only in the actual physical architecture, but also in the painting. And when you're standing here, you kind of feel like you are in the center of this calamitous event that's unfolding, which is when the giants are trying to overthrow Mount Olympus. And Mount Olympus is up there on the ceiling. And we see the giants, these really amazing, heroic kind of bodies, colossal bodies, who are being destroyed under the weight of the mountains and rocks that are kind of tumbling down on them. I love this room. This is a room that's in Mantua, Italy, so in kind of northern Italy. And this was for a wealthy family, the Gonzaga family, for their private kind of pleasure villa. They actually have a home in Mantua, and this is about 1.5 miles north of that home. And so you can imagine they have a really amazing palace, but then they just wanted like another palace just so they could kind of enjoy life. And that enjoyment is really emulated then in the paintings themselves, right? It allows for more artistic license from the artist. This painter is a man by the name of Giulio Romano. He was the most gifted, celebrated pupil of Raphael, and he just goes all out trying to paint this. And I'm showing you on the slides here the room as you would see it in a rather conventional art history class. But I want to kind of have a little mini lesson here too, to kind of think about this space and how we can maybe use VR to enhance this space. I'm showing you here a few passages. These passages are from a very early description of the room. This is recounted in the writer Giorgio Vasari's Life of Giulio Romano. This is a biography that he writes about Giulio Romano. And we think that Giorgio Vasari certainly went and visited this space, and he writes in detail about that experience. And, how many fantasies there are. He also then writes a little bit about the idea that this room is kind of deceiving you. Further on, he begins to describe just how marvelous of a space this was, how, your fear, there's the actual fear that you have that the mountains are going to crumble on top of you, right? So there's a really vivid description from the Renaissance about, people's reactions to the space. But in that same description, he also begins describing features that are no longer here. For instance, a fireplace of rustic stones that were roughly hewn. And he tells us that the fireplace in the room, when it was kind of the only source of real light, that when it was burning, kind of it made the appearances of the giants themselves were burned. And we know that this fireplace actually existed because when we look at archival material, like early prints made in the 17th century, or in drawings of the room, you can see that there was originally a fireplace in between those two doors that you're seeing on the opposite wall of the PowerPoint. And if you look closely, unfortunately, the resolution of the actual space is a little is not great. If you're on a PC, you can probably see a little bit better. But if you go to where I'm standing and you look really closely at the wall, you will eventually see that there is a break in the actual plaster. And that physical break corresponds to where the fireplace originally was. Furthermore, Vasari tells us that the floor was different. This is a later addition, this floor. But the floor was originally made of small round stones set on edge, and that the painting on the walls corresponded to the actual physical stones. So you wouldn't be able to tell where the floor stopped and the painted wall began. And there's some kind of evidence of that if you look closely at the corners of the room, see kind of where there's been repainting that's happened. So I began thinking about how we can digitally transform this space, right? This is the room, this is the model that you're standing in right now, right? It's very meta that you're looking at a picture of the room that you're in, that we've created. And I began thinking a little bit about how we can restore this space, right? Digitally restore it. So this is the outline in that break in the plaster of where the original fireplace was that I showed you a little earlier. And this is now a fireplace that's been added. Furthermore, we can illuminate that fireplace and actually have it burning, and being the source of light in the space. Also, the room itself had a different floor. We can take that floor out. We can put a new floor in, and we can put a new texture. And just for the fun of it, this is probably what the floor originally looked like, but unfortunately, at least this is what I think the floor originally looked like. But unfortunately, the painting, we've lost the painted part that would correspond to this floor. So allow me some artistic license to put a different floor in to give this effect even greater weight, which is a floor with rocks that look very similar to the rocks that are painted on the wall. So we have a room that goes from this to a room that looks like this. And better yet, we can actually go and visit this room. So if you want to go, follow me to this corner here, go through the portal, and we'll go back to this restored space. Now, I'm not listen, my 3D modeling skills are really limited, okay? I'm learning Blender slowly. But I would love to beef up that animation of the fire. I've done it in other platforms where it's roaring fire. And I was really trying desperately to put a sound clip in here of the crackling of a fire, right? Just because you would get them the experience of what it would sound like, the crackling of the fire. And you know, sometimes that fire kind of just bursts and you kind of flinch. And at that same time that you flinch from the crackling of the fire, you're kind of flinching because the room itself is caving in. You can imagine how the drama of the light, right, would change, kind of create this really eerie experience here. And in fact, if you look at the wall where the fireplace is, you can see that there's actually little flames that are coming out from between the rocks, right, up higher. And that's because this giant that's being buried in stone is the giant who, according to mythology, is located under Mount Etna, right? So the fire is then the source of the fire of the volcano that comes up as a result. And what's even cooler is that opposite of the fireplace, way up in the ceiling, and I wish I had my pointer, my laser pointer, but there is this god who is dressed in green. He's a little corpulent. He has a beard. But he has over his shoulder, he holds a hammer. And that god is Vulcan. Vulcan, who's the god of the forge. And he looks down at his fireplace, right? So he is the god of the hearth. So he is there to kind of watch over the fire. There's some accounts that maybe even in this space there would have been kind of sound effects. In fact, we know that because of the architecture, these walls are all whispering walls. So if you were to go into the corner, you could hear someone that's on the opposite side if they just whispered to you. But there's even some, perhaps, I could imagine, I really want to find evidence of this. I don't have evidence of it, but maybe that thunder sheets would have been used. So there would have been kind of like the clasp of thunder and lightning that would have kind of enhanced that kind of experience as well. Any questions? Oh, thanks. Yeah. I really, this is one of my favorite little pet projects that I've been doing over the last couple of years, trying to think about, not just now recreating spaces, as many of you are pointing out, but also what does this offer? What does this technology offer that's not possible in the real world?
That is really the very best question to ask when you're developing in XR Like, what is the reason to do this digitally?
Right.
And that's an awesome use case. I love it.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You far exceeded any expectations I ever had. This is fantastic, Professor
Thanks.
Hupe.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I can't speak. I'm
I mean,
speechless.
that's the whole point, you know. I mean, it's kind of cool, you know, to it's neat when art takes your breath away, right? And that was clearly the whole intention of a room like this. That is exactly what the artist and what the patron who paid for this is after. They want you to be dumbfounded when you walk into it. And when you read Giorgio Vasari's description, he clearly was, right? He was trying to find words to describe a space like this, right? And I think that, you know, what's really great is that we now have a technology that allows us to have a similar reaction. I think if I were to show a 2D image of, you know, even the images I was showing you in the other room of, you know, the screenshots of this space, yeah, it was cool, right? But I think it's even cooler when you get to see it, right? It kind of really begins to click and make sense. And you begin to have a reaction to the space that is closer or more akin to the reaction that the artist and the patron wanted you to have. And I think that that's really interesting, that we now are entering into a world where that is possible.
I think too, this sort of technology is making travel like to these places a little bit more accessible.
Yeah.
You know, like the technology, the headsets are still kind of unaffordable for
Sure.
you know many population, but the fact that you know you could still view these places in a web browser, for example, and for somebody who's probably you know never going to make it to Italy for any number of reasons, like this is so amazing. You know, you're actually kind of sharing the world in a really really unique way.
Thank you. Yeah, no, you know, this is something that I think a lot about, right? And I don't ever want to imagine that I'm creating a true substitute for travel. You know, but the reality is that not everyone can travel, right? For various reasons. For, you know, physical ability, for financial ability, time ability, right? All these resources that you need to have at your disposal in order to travel. So this allows for people to kind of have an experience. Also, you know, it's really important for me that I continue to develop for WebXR applications, because I want people you shouldn't need to have a headset to have access, right? And, you know, I provide models that are both higher. We have higher fidelity models, high resolution models that are available, but then we also have really low resolution models that can work on a phone, right? And that people can then, you know, just use their iPhone or smartphone and pan around and look and experience these spaces. I have a former social studies teacher from when I was in middle school who can't travel, and she wrote to me recently because I post, you know, to these rooms, and just like how delighted she is whenever I post a new space, because she gets to experience it when she knows that she'll never probably get there in person, right? And that's like awesome. That is one of the you know, cultural heritage is everyone's heritage. So to create access to these is really important. Yeah.
Well,
Public schools. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say that is also improving like society in general, like something that's really important to the like growth of a human being is to get out of their own little, you know, community and see the world. And, you know, for a lot of us, it's not physically possible, but like you're, you know, expanding minds, showing things on the other side of the world that a lot of people may never get to see in real life.
Yeah.
It's good for everybody. So,
Yeah.
sorry, Yovi, go ahead.
No, it's a great point. So, Yeah, and the comment, that, we could put VR headsets, yes, a $300 headset is a lot cheaper than a plane ticket to any of these spaces, not to mention then, the housing and food and all that stuff. So, and yeah, if public libraries have, access to, provide access to headsets and things, that would be amazing to see that, in the future.
Professor Hupe, you probably didn't see Kevin Adjective Beaver's comment about hearing. It's so cool to hear your excitement as you explain all this, because you could hear it in your voice. You were as excited as we are to see it, and you were excited. You were excited to see. I mean, you couldn't see our faces. Actually, we were on mute, so you couldn't even hear our comments. So you didn't really get to experience how excited we all are until right now. And then you can just tell, and you can tell by our questions. And I'm kind of wondering to me, I was going to ask you what your vision for the future was, but this is so cool. I'm curious where you started and what is your vision? I mean, this is extremely cool. And I just did it on the desktop so that I'd have audio, but I know I've been in these sites, and please leave them up for a couple weeks so people can come back in their headsets.
Yes.
But,
what
do you want beyond this?
So, this all started with actually a Google Cardboard back in 2018, when I was creating like 360 tours, static images of various sites. And I thought that was, super cool. And then that led during COVID to like the idea of creating actual VR environments. So, where do we go from here? We go from here by expanding the catalog. I think that's really important. I also think it's really important that educators and scholars really be involved in this creation process. One of the things that I'm really skeptical of or reticent about is the idea of like tech companies kind of automatically going in and doing it all themselves, because there are certain questions that scholars ask, particularly in how we teach these spaces and convey these spaces to a public, that I think need to be considered in the back end before you go and actually photograph photograph them. Building the catalog out. So every year we try to do 3 to 4 sites to kind of expand. We are right now working with a library in Italy. This is the Biblioteca Malatestiana library, which is the oldest civic library in the world. It is the second public library in the world. And what I mean by civic library is it was owned by the citizens of this small town. It was opened in 1457, I believe, was the date that it opened. Very few people go to Cesena to go visit this library. And I want them to go because it's one of the most amazing spaces. We were just there a couple of weeks ago photographing it. And we were talking to the people in heading the library, and one of the things that they want to do is have our model on their landing page, so that people can explore it, and get to see the space before going to visit and kind of drum up interest. But then we also want all of the books of this library are still in the library, right? And they've been digitized. So what we want to do is we want to create an application where when you're visiting the virtual library, you can then sit down at one of the desks and pull out one of the books and flip through the books, right? And kind of read in the library like you were reading in the Renaissance. And all of that technology exists. All of the code exists for this. So I'm working with several scholars to kind of get this implemented. But kind of creating more experiences like that would be great. I would one day love to have an independent app built that would allow for really the public to use, and probably have like more guided tours or maybe other kind of facilitated facilitated viewing for people of some of these spaces. Any other questions?
I know you guys have questions.
think Yogi was trying to say something, but has had trouble staying in the.
Oh, in the room.
Yeah.
I did put one more room here if you want to go see it. It's the Piccolomini Library. It's this portal over here. We can meet there, and we can eventually bid our dues there. But it's another space that I love to kind of show off too. So I'll meet you there. So this is I've been on the library kick, I guess. I love libraries. So this is a library that's adjacent to a church in Siena, the main Duomo, the main cathedral of Siena. This is the Piccolomini Library. So the wealthy Piccolomini family from Siena, who eventually become Pope, they commission this great little space to house the books that were not only part of their private collection. Today it houses these large texts, which these are antiphons, which would be used for the clergy to sing. That's why they're so big. So you can see them from a great distance. So they house those books. But this would have been filled with books in the Renaissance, and has really great paintings by the artist Pinturicchio about the really great deeds that Piccolomini did in his life. So all about aggrandizing oneself, right? That we see here. This was a space that we did 3 years ago, the same year actually that we did the Sala dei Giganti, the room that we were just in. This was another one that we had access to as well.
Very cool. I had a question about you mentioned like wanting like an app.
Yes.
Have you checked out Vertex Farm 3D?
I have not yet. No.
It's
Can you send me that information?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we already connected on LinkedIn?
We might. I think we probably are. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just, I'm an art historian, so I'm very bad at LinkedIn. So Terry, you're lucky that I didn't read your message because I'm trying to get better. And some of this is all still out of my league, I would say. So
I'm a pest, and
You're doing great.
I contact you multiple different sources. So if you don't answer my LinkedIn, I hunt you down in other ways. And Ray had told me that she already asked you, so that made it even easier.
Yeah.
But you responded in 5 days, which is very quick.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good for me, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, because you and I can tell LinkedIn tells you if people use it very much, so that kind of gives you an idea too. And everybody, he makes him he out his contact is on the invite for this, and he's very reachable, but he's also very busy. And also, and if you want to travel, don't think you can't. This inspires you to go places. And the only thing I wish is I would have done it sooner. And I thought traveling was a waste of money, but my art history teacher inspired me, and it took me a long time to ever go. And don't wait. And when you go, of course you're going to want to go again, but you can do it in an inexpensive way. You can buy cheaper food. You can get there in an inexpensive way. So let this inspire you. Don't wait decades to go.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Oh, this is great. I love learning new things and all these things all these platforms that I never knew about. I mean, I had no idea what Blender was for a very long time. So
Yay, another Blender nerd here.
Blender's amazing. Blender is great. And I love that it's free. I think that's really important. We thought about going like ZBrush or one of the, another, subscription-based one, and I've doubled down on Blender because it's really important to keep open access stuff alive.
Awesome. I wish more businesses would go with their model.
Yes. Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah.
As a photogrammetry nerd, I worked for a few years at a 3D printing shop where we had LiDAR scanners, hand scanners. I also have found that just using a simple phone is quite adequate.
Yeah.
Especially modern phone cameras for photogrammetry. How do you decide what to touch up and what not to touch up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a really hard question. First of all, I want to second that the mobile device can make really great models. I'm actually about to head to Miami next week to run a workshop for the Mud Foundation, and while I'm there, I'm also going to do a workshop on mobile photogrammetry. And there's several spaces actually on our website that were mobile captured, and we always tell you how we capture in the metadata, these spaces. And so, yeah, the technology is getting so good right now, which is pretty awesome. And you can process these things on a mobile app, which takes only a couple of minutes, as opposed to when we're doing it on our software, where it takes sometimes a couple of days to do it. The decision on what we touch up. Gosh, I don't have a very good answer for you. Besides the fact that I have a general rule that I try to remove any stanchions, like anything that is in the room to prevent visitors from touching the walls, right? So fencing, that kind of stuff. I think in this room, let me look to see in the corner. Yeah, it's still there. There's a fire extinguisher in the corner on the left by the door. I think I will eventually remove that fire extinguisher because I think it's hideous. The floor is all new. It is the tile is actually someone from ArtStation. I found that they created a texture of this actual tile that's from the room. But I use that to create a lower poly version of the floor. So I do make decisions like that. I often rip out floors. I might even rip out sections of walls to try to save some of the geometry and some of the texture mapping, and bring it down to a 1K texture on the floor, because it's nice, but nobody's going to really be paying attention to the floor. They should be paying walls. And I'm starting to work with some students now who actually have some background in 3D modeling to help retypologize and just kind of improve the quality of the models so they run more efficiently on WebXR platforms. The biggest challenge for me is textures. That is the challenge that I will lose sleep over all the time, because how do we get as faithful textures as humanly possible that we're not losing some of the resolution so you can see the details of the paintings. And I don't know, one day I will talk to a professional who knows about this, because right now, I don't even want to tell you what my technique is, but I've developed these kinds of workarounds to try to compress things and make the file smaller and so forth.
That's what professionals do.
Yeah, good.
And Professor Hupe, you did a great job on your PowerPoints because they worked, and in Spatial, a lot of times they don't. So I think
that's good.
You shrunk them and made them work in here, and that was great.
I know PowerPoint well.
But you had to make it little enough that it worked in here. And
yeah,
and in
it was 7 megabytes, so that was pretty good.
That was impressive.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'll hang out for a few more minutes if people have questions, but otherwise, Carrie, I just want to thank you again for the invitation, and for all of you for having so many amazing questions and getting my mind going and getting me excited about this work. We're about to start the model build from this summer, so it's always exciting, getting all these ideas in place before we start sitting down at the computer and trying to hatch out some new models.
So the way you took us through here, had you done that before?
No.
No, that was excellent. Obviously you teach in front of the class, but to have the PowerPoint to show it to us and then to let us walk into it, that was just...
I've done a PowerPoint before in a space just like for like better details of detail shots of things. But I like the whole portal thing where you can kind of tell us I don't know, go around to different places and teleport.
I'm the only one that knew you had that room, so it was taking all of my self-control not to say, can we go to the room? But I didn't. I thought you were gonna, because when we were practicing, he just put it on top of the room we were in instead of going to it. Like, this way worked a lot better. Good job.
Good, thanks.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you everybody for coming and asking questions. And
thank you. Yeah, and reach out. LinkedIn. I will be on LinkedIn. Also, at Prof Hupe is my Instagram handle, and I'm on that a lot too. So
spell that for him.
It's I'll put it in the chat too. It's at PROF and HUPE. My and that's also my Sketchfab name. Yeah, all the socials.
Great.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. It was great to reconnect again and see.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Oh, then thanks also for the suggestion. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. I do have to get going. I've got another meeting at 6:30. So, but it was great to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. And all our XR Meetup people will be here the same time next month, the last Wednesday of the month, 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. See y'all then.
Thank you.